And I think we are now live.
Right.
Are we? Yes, we are. Okay. So it's a great pleasure, Penny, to have you back again. Thank you very much for coming back.
My pleasure. It's good to be here. I love your people. So,
And they love you, so it's great. So
uh,
we thought we might talk a little bit today about the financial system, the economy, because I think there's quite a lot to talk about there, isn't there, Penny?
no, nothing's happening. Oh, sorry. I'm being facetious or sarcastic.
That's quite all right.
Yeah.
You mentioned in one of your latest videos that you saw something that looked like it could be the end of the United States or the end of something to do with America. So could you perhaps just elaborate a little on that to begin with, Penny?
Um, okay, that was looking at the tarot, for the United States for the month of May. And I had seen some really rough spots, but I was just kind of like, okay, we got some rough spots. We'll get through it. But the cards, all the cards in that entire reading, which I did a little bit differently than I usually do, came up with disaster, unforeseen, catastrophe, events that would crush or destroy. And by the end of that reading, I thought, oh my, it looks like something big is either going to happen or the start of that has already started, but it's going to amp up and become really visible, viable, something that people can see and get their mind around. And what it looked like was that it was the end of the United States. And at the time I saw that, I thought, okay, we've been seeing a lot of stuff that, I'll make it personal. I've been seeing a lot of stuff that I don't like, that I think is not good for us or our country or our legal system or our financial system. And I get to the financial system and it just stops. It's like it rolls over and dies. And so what I've come to the conclusion of is, okay, let's just keep watching, number one. But it looks like we are at the end of the dollar as the world's financial system or reserve currency. And that really is the end of the world's financial system as we have known it for the
Yes.
last, 50, 70 years, something like that. And that whole shock of the dollar going down, the United States losing everything, power, prestige, any kind of options, any kind of influence in terms of, okay, you want to make a deal? All of that is gone. And the financial system looks pretty rough. So I think the U.S. has been tied right around the neck with its financial system, and it has used that financial system to pound away at countries everywhere, everywhere around the planet. So every so often I think, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry that, our leaders have been so awful in so many ways and so crude and crass. And other times, they're trying to do something good, but there's always an ulterior motive. And I can see that motive and I can see what the agenda is. It's always a financial agenda under the surface of whatever that help is. And so I think all of that is coming to an end. And maybe it needs to, but if you're not ready for that, then there's going to be difficulty, big difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's huge, isn't it? I mean, I think it's been a big turning point now that interest rates have started to rise.
Yeah.
Yeah. that is like
Yep.
a big warning sign of a big shift. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's like a red flag that says, "Yoo-hoo, are you paying attention?" The interest rates have gone up. There's a whole bunch of countries now that are saying, "No, we're not going to buy anything from the U.S. because we don't want their dollars." I think I'm not sure about these numbers, but I think we were almost at the top of the export pile years ago, way in the back. Um, but I think we're now about 11% of all global trade. We're not giving or making anything except weapons. And that's the sum total of what we export. Well, that's other people have copied the weapons. They have developed their scientists and their engineers. What do they need us for? And so the U.S. is in a world of hurt right now. Israel has said, Israel, that's one of our main partners. I know we're going to use the UN to buy our energy. I thought, holy cow. Okay.
Yeah.
Other countries doing the same thing. Um, the whole sanctions thing against Russian, um, Russian oil. I think there's something like 11 countries in Europe have said, well, let's just get around those sanctions by opening a Russian bank account, and we'll do our trade in rubles through the Russian bank account, and it won't be, we'll get around the sanctions. It won't look like we're buying oil, but they have to buy or liquid natural gas or whatever it is they're getting. Um, that's really how they're getting around all of that. And so everything is continuing kind of the way that it always has been, except for the US and the US financial system. And the stock market has gone down and down. It's big, the volatility that you see when we get into a bear market. That's happening now. The other day it dropped, I think, 1,100 points, and I haven't heard whether it went back up or not yet. But that's a big kick in the butt for a lot of investors.
It's
So,
huge. It's
yeah,
huge. And
yeah,
and the Fed has committed publicly to reducing its balance sheet by 95 billion per month.
I know.
I
I know.
mean,
Yeah. What are we gonna do? What can you say in the face of that?
I
There's,
mean,
I've said to people, a couple people I've asked, I said, well, what have I been saying? Land, gold, silver. I'm adding food, alcohol. Even though I don't like cigarettes, some people still trade in cigarettes, and ammunition. There are some people who have stocked up on ammunition, and that becomes a viable form of money. Any old junk, people who hoard, are probably going to be some of the more well-off people in the future as we go down. And I
yeah,
think back in January when I saw the financial system, and I forget exactly how it went, but February went down on its knees, and March it went down on its belly, and April, in May it rolled over and died. In April it rolled over, and in May it had final convulsions and died. And I'm looking at this giant dinosaur as it's dying and thinking, uh-oh, um, we're going to have some big difficulty here. So all of the things that we need, the everyday things, those are the things that are going to be of value. That's going to be the money. And people, I think what I see is that people are so um, fed up with the system that we've had in the West that they refuse to act as if, I mean, some of them will riot and protest and all that, but the majority of people end up saying, we're not going to fall for that story that we're in trouble. We're just going to trade and make our own money. And that brings up the whole question of who has the right to produce money? Why is it only governments? Who gave them that right? And why did they, once they had that right, turn around and make it illegal for anybody else to print money? So that's a big question. That's a troublemaking kind of question. And what I see is people saying, you know what, we're making our own money. We're going to use things that we think are worth something. And what do you call that? Barter or trade or, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There's this attitude of, no, we're taking care of one another and, poop on you, Mr. Government. And so we actually do pretty well because we're stubborn and prideful in a really good way. So,
Yes, absolutely. And
yeah.
so, Penny, I mean, you've mentioned all these different things. Do you have any idea why gold hasn't picked up? Why gold seems to be
Oh,
still slammed down?
yeah, the gold and silver are so carefully controlled. I think
Oh,
the big banks have the biggest stores of gold and silver, and they are making sure that it stays down so that nobody sees a crisis so that they can keep buying it until it's all gone. And then the people are going to be SOL, as my mother would say. So I don't know if people in Europe know what that means, but it means shit out of luck. Excuse my French. So, so once there's no gold out there for anybody else to pick up, then the big banks will say, "Oh, you know, we have some gold. We'll do this or we'll do that," and they're going to issue their central bank digital currencies. And once they have, this is one of the things I've seen that I really haven't liked. Um, the banks it continues to look like, I've been watching this for a couple of months. Bank of America goes down, goes belly up.
wow.
And that's huge because that's one of the too big to fail banks.
Yep.
So once that happens, um, the how do I say this? All those people with all their money in that bank then go, woe is me. And the bank then turns around and says, oh, but we have all this gold. So we're going to put out this new system, digital currencies, and we're just going to put your money back in your account backed by our gold, but it's going to be digital currency, and you have to open a digital wallet, which is going to be a whole new application process that gives them all sorts of rights.
Mm.
And so when you sign that new KYC, know your customer form that the bank wants, it's going to give them the right to do all the kind of things that we don't want them to do, which is control how much you spend on whatever,
Yeah.
whether it's good stuff or bad stuff. And they will definitely, have a say in whether you can buy extra food and how much, whether you can travel and where. Everything that you want to do will be subject to their control. And that's what they want. And so when Bank of America does that, the other banks are going to go, oh, this is a really good idea, like it's a brand new idea. And they're
Yeah.
going to come along and say, let's do the same thing. And so they're going to try and put out their digital currency. So we will all have digital currencies, except for the few people who have bought some gold, bought some silver, invested in some cryptocurrencies. Now, their cryptocurrency ideas um, are pretty much under their control, but there are other cryptocurrencies, digital currencies like Bitcoin, and I think Ethereum, and there's a few others that are not under their control, and those become very valuable. They go up in value, and a lot of people lose a lot of money because they don't really understand the cryptocurrency, decentralized blockchain kind of system. And so the banks will make their digital currency just so easy and so transparent and so simple, just like using your MasterCard, except it's going to be a digital currency card, which, as far as I'm concerned, debit cards, MasterCard, Visa, those are all already digital currency.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and I think, let me just mention this. I mention this as often as I can to whatever group I'm talking with. I think it's really important for us to realize that digital currencies, let's see, how do I say this? Um, they, well, let me leave that until we get into a different part of our conversation. So let's just leave that dangling for a moment, okay? So,
Oh,
uh,
okay. You've got me on a little tenterhook here, but that's okay. We can come back to that, Penny. No problem.
okay,
No problem.
all right, yeah. So we just, people be opening some kind of either Bitcoin, or you only have to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin and you'll get point, I don't know, 0.00001% or something of a Bitcoin. But the process is what you need to learn, not having the Bitcoin. It's how to open and be responsible for your own money. Because the big banks are really wanting to make that so simple that you just slide right into their palm and their pocket.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And they just create money out of thin air. They put zeros on the computer screens.
All right. So you brought it up. I'm going to say what I was going to say a minute ago. The legal definition of a transaction is that both parties have to exchange something real. Real. Both parties have to take a risk. And when one of the parties isn't handing over anything real and isn't taking any risk, then it's not a transaction. It's not a legal transaction. And the person who took the risk and handed over something real has the right to take that back again. So mortgages in which the bank just added $100,000 in digital zeros to your bank account is really that kind of transaction. And the precedent has been set in Wisconsin that says that, in which a judge said, I'm sorry, Mr. Banker, you did not take a risk and you did not turn over anything real, and this guy does not have to pay off that mortgage. It's his house. Your punishment for having tried to pretend that you were doing something real is that you lose. And that, I think, is something that we all need to pay attention to. The legal definition of a transaction is both sides exchange something real, and there has to be risk. And when the bank isn't taking any risk and all they're doing is digital stuff, that is not a transaction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think we need to be aware of that, and be aware that they're probably going to try and change that legal definition of a transaction in their KYC, know their customer application, in which you fill out your name, your address, here's the account that you're opening, blah, blah, blah. All of the information that you give the bank when you set up an ordinary bank account, you have to also give them when you set up a digital wallet. So, just anybody who's gets into deep doo-doo with the bank over their mortgage, keep that in mind. You can get a lawyer, go to court, and you will probably not have to pay your mortgage.
Wow. There's a lot for us to learn here, isn't there? Yeah,
Yeah, there is.
learning curves, and you have to be willing to put the effort in.
That's right.
There's a question that came in by A.A. Riley too, asking what backs Bitcoin?
Nothing. Bitcoin, it's the same thing as with the fiat money system. The only thing that that Bitcoin has going for it, only things, our belief, the fact that it isn't controlled by any government, the fact that there's a limited supply,
Yeah.
and that's it. That, and it's on the blockchain. The blockchain, I don't know. Most people probably know how the blockchain works, but for the few who don't, when you make a transaction on the blockchain, that transaction is then disseminated out to all the other blockchains, all the other miners who are mining. We call it mining Bitcoin. And what they're really doing is setting up these long strings of code that are attached to that transaction that then get saved into a particular block of this computer system, and then once it gets the whole coding and it's all saved onto this one blockchain, it goes out to thousands upon thousands of other blockchains. And so you can't hack a blockchain, because you'd have to hack thousands of other computers all around the world. And so if somebody tries to hack your account, it ends up being non-verified, and the money goes back in your account, because all the other computers say, no, that isn't a valid transaction. That didn't really occur. So so there's a little bit of a guarantee there that you can't lose with a blockchain. Now, I know some other things in which you could technically lose, but those would be pretty rare and pretty hard to accomplish. So that's, we have nothing backing our fiat financial system, nothing. No gold, not even any belief anymore, and it's on a lot of people's computers, and it's not on a blockchain, and so it gets hacked all the time. And big transactions, I know personal friends who got involved in deals, $10-20 million deals, and that money disappeared en route to their account. Just disappeared. Why? Because they were trying to do something that made the world better for us. And the government just, nope, sorry, we need to investigate that money. That could be a terrorist operation. I'm like, oh my God. And $20 million just gone. So there has been a really serious effort to keep us down, to keep us dumb, to keep us unevolved. And I was driving somewhere the other day, and the trash along the side of the road was everywhere. And it was awful. And I thought, no offense, Ecuador, but it reminded me of some of the places I've been in Ecuador or in South America, where there's trash everywhere, and people are poor as church mice, and stuff is falling down or broken down. Yes, there are beautiful places everywhere, but when you get out of those beautiful places where the control is so tight, then you get into places where people are lost in apathy, and they don't take care of their space. They don't clean it up. And that has a psychological effect of sadness and depression. Junk everywhere is clutter in the mind. It's clutter in the heart. So I see that everywhere across America now. I just drove across America last month. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Penny, on this theme of it, I mean, it looks like everything's crashing down. Yes, it's the general trajectory. Would we include real estate in that?
Yeah, real estate is starting to come down. The real estate, in the top 10 cities across the US has begun to drop. And of course, that trend has been going on very, very lightly
Yeah.
for the last 3 or 4 months. But after that Fed raise on interest rates, it went down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And what I see is it's gonna go into the toilet in the Western countries. And part of the reason is because the financial system is gonna also be in the toilet. And the result is that not much is moving.
Mhm.
And people are pretty much, um, there's a lot of migration still going on.
Mhm.
And that's gonna trip up a lot of those late migrators who are trying to get out of big cities, and who are realizing how vulnerable they are because the food is not gonna be there,
Mhm.
um, or it's gonna be so expensive. Ah, it's really, I don't know how people are gonna feed themselves if they don't grow some of their food.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
all of you part-time wannabe gardeners out there, get going. We need you. So,
Absolutely. I mean, being more self-sufficient and resilient, this
yeah,
is this is one of the big lessons of what
I
we're
know.
in and what is to come, isn't it, Penny?
It is. It is, and I think, along with the food thing, I haven't said this anywhere, but I'll say it now. I've been watching Amazon for probably the last 6 months, pretty closely, and, because I started seeing that once all the mom and pop stores were closed, the next thing would be all the big retailers would begin having difficulty getting supply. And we're seeing that now with the supply chains, um, interfered with and stalled out everywhere. And once the big stores, the big retail stores, had very little to offer, they were gonna shut down Amazon or break it up, or something was gonna go wrong with Amazon, and that's supplying everybody with everything at this point, and we would all be up the creek without a paddle. And that is beginning to look more and more the case at this point. And just this morning, I was reading that, Jeff Bezos was dumping not just a few Amazon stocks, not millions, but billions of dollars worth of Amazon stock. And he's investing it in a very low Earth orbit satellite system, which is internet that does not rely on wires and things like that. Um, and so that when you start divesting yourself of your own company's stock in the billions of dollars, there's a message there. And I often think about the catastrophe that we are facing in terms of the micronova, or if you don't want to call it the micronova, just say the sun has a cyclic or cycle of, kind of a massive electrical output. Whether you call that a big EMP, if it's big enough, it's not just going to be an EMP, it's going to push like a wave on the ocean. It'll be a wave in space, and it'll push all kinds of space debris at our planet, and we'll just get pounded with all of that. A lot of infrastructure destroyed. Well, if our entire satellite system is out there in space and it's circling the Earth in a very low Earth orbit, and that occurs, what happens to our internet? It's only the stuff that's in ground that ends up being workable, and even then, only if we have electricity. There's a lot of ifs. Um, so we're facing a perfect storm in this decade of everything that we have built having to be I think, rethought and reinvented and redesigned such that it takes into account the reality of our planet and our sun and our solar system and our relationship with other planets, and things like that. Those are not as stable as we think they are. And yes, if something only shifts once every 12, 15,000 years, well, that's not our problem, maybe. But the last shift was 12,000 years ago. And so what we have is evidence that that happens every 12,000 years. And here we are. So that adds to the stuff that we need to be preparing for. And I don't see very many people doing that.
Yeah.
They're preparing for a couple months worth of difficulty, but not the long-term challenge that a shift or change in the way the sun and the planets relate to one another, which that, if you watch what's it called? There's a video series called The Catastrophe Cycle, maybe. It's by a guy named, he's got a website called Suspicious Observers. And
Yes.
if you watch that, if you watch his Catastrophe Cycle series, which I had already known about, long before I watched that, it was like, oh, somebody else is seeing the same thing I'm seeing, and the same thing that was really pretty well laid out by Doug Vogt on his website. So here we are. We have lots and lots of things that we can be preparing for and thinking about long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if those things happen, does our financial system matter? Maybe not so much. But in the meantime, it matters a heck of a lot. And we have to be in reality with what's happening day to day to day.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are things that the average person can do.
Yeah,
That
there's
it's,
a lot.
there's a lot that you've mentioned time and again. I know in your videos, and I've mentioned them in my videos time and again. I
Yeah.
mean, if you don't have much money, you can still get some silver.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Silver
Yeah.
has not gone up that much.
It's so
So,
cheap, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
it
silver looks
is.
like a real buy,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it is.
So if somebody's got money in the bank,
Okay.
what would you suggest they do with that money? Because you need some money to transact. A little in
Um,
the bank, don't you? You need a little.
yeah, I would keep enough to carry out my usual transactions, um, but not too much more than that. If you have money in the bank, put it on your house or your car or your whatever other debts you got. Get out of debt. There's an argument counter to that that says if the financial system goes down, the debt goes with it. And I think that's another thing I would remind people about is don't let, I've said this, I think maybe even on one of your other talks with me, if their financial system goes down, that's their problem. And don't let them take anything away from you saying, well, you're not paying this or you're not doing that. And all you have to say is, look, I'm more than willing to pay. You fix your system and I'll keep paying. I'm in your system. This isn't my problem. This is yours. And we have not gotten to that point of being sassy enough that we have stood our ground and said, no, wait a minute. This isn't, this isn't just a one-sided thing. I'm agreeing to go along with your stuff as long as it's working well. And if it's not, then, then forget it. Let me know when it's up and running again. So that's, something that I think is really, um, I think you need to think that through for yourself because it really calls into question all of our personal programming that each one of us has struggled through. Um, we need to this, we need to be a good girl or a good boy, or we need to cooperate, or we need to pay our bills, or what will the neighbors think, or what will our credit score be, or. All that is mostly a game. Why are we playing that? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to ask you, Bracha, what do the stars say about this next month or two in terms of finance?
Well, it's very intense. That was one of the reasons I wanted to speak about finance with you today, is because we've
Oh,
got this North Node in Taurus. Taurus is the financial system, our earth, how we exchange goods and services,
oh,
our skills, our gifts, our food, agriculture, systems. I mean,
ah,
all of this is activated, and the North Node suggests, Penny, this is what we have to grow into, a new system. Uranus is going to hit the node in July. So, yeah, this is,
now what does Uranus mean?
well, Uranus is a shock, is a surprise, is sudden changes, using technology in new ways. I mean, look at Israel, the way they use technology. They provide, they
Yeah,
live in a desert, and yet about 95% of their food is self-grown.
that's
Yeah,
right.
so they're pretty independent, and
Yeah,
most countries are not. So, but they use technology to do that. So, technology, how can we use technology more intelligently? There's a lot there. Yes, Penny, carry on. I can hear you.
wow.
Ready.
Okay. Um, okay, so well, I was hoping that maybe the stars would say it's going to smooth out, but it doesn't sound like that. So,
It doesn't smooth out, but there are so many opportunities for new ways of doing things if
ta-da,
we are ready to get out of that small mind conditioning
right.
that we've lived under for all these years. We've been brought up, as you said, you do this, you do that, you owe this, slaves to a certain system.
Yeah.
And if we're ready to explore new possibilities,
Mm,
then there's lots of light available for the new frequency.
hmm.
Mm.
I wonder what the technology angle of shock in July is about. That rings some bells. I've started the look-see for May 15th, and I was working on that just kind of here and there. But the thing that kept coming up, and I kept putting it aside, was the Russia-Ukraine war, and that's somewhere between the end of May and the end of August, there was going to be look like an attack on the U.S. I hope that's not the case, but so far, Putin has pretty much, what can I say? He's done what he said he was going to do. And that is something that I think we need to pay attention to. He has said, don't be supplying Ukrainians with weapons and men and machinery and tactical and logistical support. And what have we done? We've done exactly that. And they're sending all kinds of men, money, weapons, machinery, support over there. I don't think the Ukrainians, well, I shouldn't say that. I have wondered how much of the fighting is being done by Ukrainians and how much is being done by hired mercenaries, hired by the West. That really bothers me, because that means if Putin's saying, hey, don't be sending them weapons or you become our enemy, it looked like there was an attack, not just on us, but on a couple of places and in Europe, and that would be a disaster. And I know that the cabal has wanted a war, and so they're going to milk this war for all it's worth. And that's,
We've got
yeah.
to watch it. Yeah, everything's going into Aries. Tomorrow, Jupiter goes into Aries. At the end of the month, Mars goes into Aries. This is very warmongering, fighting,
Oh,
battle type energy. So yeah, it's starting. I mean, the potential is there. I'm not saying it will happen. We hope not, but certainly it's a fanatical type of energy.
Yeah.
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 And when I've looked at that each time it's come up, I've thought, I'm certain we will pay attention to the implications of that kind of support of Ukraine. I'm sure that they'll have enough common sense to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. But the fanaticism doesn't suggest common sense. So,
It's
does that end by the beginning of August or the end of August? Maybe does Jupiter move past Aries or no?
well, Jupiter goes back into Pisces towards the end of the year briefly, and then back into Aries. But we're going to hit the Saturn-Uranus square from October again, which
Oh,
is very much about the people, the
yep.
freedom of the people, and the governments and the corporations very much at odds with one another. So
Okay.
that,
That
that's coming
that's
up.
Saturn, because I'm born under the influence of Saturn. That's the only planet I really know anything about. And it's like, that's about government, that's about structure, that's about building, construction, deconstruction, um, paying attention to what's right and
Yeah,
what's not right, etc. So,
yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, it eases off a little around the August time, but then in October, woof, it
Okay.
sort of comes back in another wave.
Okay. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, it just, I think if there was an approach that we would want to take, um, the splitting that's occurring right now between the people that want to restore the old system or who are going along with the old, how do I say it, the old way of seeing things versus the people who want to move on into something new,
Yeah.
something peaceable, something beautiful, something that they can live with. And it requires seeing the world in a whole different way. That split is what I see happening right now. And every so often, I think, when you just said about we're going into this warlike mode, and I'm seeing myself, it looks like there's an attack
Mm.
on the West, and including the U.S., which we've not had really an attack on our soil. But all of that to say, if there's a whole bunch of people that leave, the people that are left, we're going to be right where Dolores Cannon said we would be. We would wake up one day, the people that want the old way, and they would say, oh, wow, all those crazy people that were talking about conspiracy theories, they're all gone. And we would wake up one day and say, wow, the war took care of all those people that just refused to wake up. And there's the split right there. And you're in two different frequency zones that are just enough different. It's like when you change the channel on the TV from, I don't know what you guys' channels might be, and I don't even know what we have over here anymore. But let's say channel 3 and channel 8. It's enough of a difference that you don't know what's happening on that other channel, in that other frequency zone, which
Yes.
constitutes a reality zone. And
Yes.
you're only in yours. And you're looking at possibilities, you're looking at all kinds of new
Oh,
technology, you're
yes.
looking at people who are no longer afraid to come out of the woodwork and say, well, I was involved in this. Maybe we could build, maybe we could create, maybe we
Yes.
could develop, whatever.
And
So,
there's so many people sort of waiting in the wings. Yeah.
yes,
That's
yes.
it's like they're sort of, is it safe to come out yet?
No, I know.
Yeah.
It
Uh,
may be safe, but people are going to be very tentative in that. And maybe that won't really be the case for another couple years because I do see that what starts as an attack on the West by Russia, ends up becoming an attack of the people on the governments of the world. And I was just talking about this yesterday. The little man in brown robes had said in response to my worry way back then, well, are we going to be taken over? Are we going to be conquered and be under somebody else's control? And they said, no, not really. It's going to be it would be much more accurate to say that the government is taken over by the people who have had enough. And that, excuse me, and that then results in the takedown of the governments, plural, and the end of the concept, let me say it this way, the end of the supremacy of the concept of nations, that nations are the best way to organize ourselves, that nations are the best way to conduct business with one another. And they kept saying they called it the global network. The global network is going to have started that process in which people are communicating all over the planet. And then the people will finish that because they're tired of all the restrictions, not only financial, but legal, governmental, medical, educational, conceptual, military, all of that. They're tired of all of that being used against themselves. And they're saying, no, we don't want any nations because we don't want any group of people getting that much power, the power to tax us and then take that money and use it against us. And that, I think we're coming right to that. We're right at that, right at that point in time. Hang on a second there. Yeah. So, so we're in some pretty challenging times, pretty interesting times.
Yeah, absolutely. And the US is in its Pluto return year. It hits again in July. It hit in February. It hits again in July, and it hits again in November. So this is, huge, huge.
What does that mean? What's a Pluto return?
Well, the United States was founded when Pluto was at 27 degrees of Capricorn, and we're now 248 or 50 years, I don't know the exact count.
Past that?
We're at that Pluto return. So now it's like, what's the Constitution of the United States? What needs to change? What all the structures, the power structures.
Wow.
What needs to go? What needs to be renewed? It's huge. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Some months ago, 6 months ago, I was invited to help add to a new constitution. And so I wrote it all up and I just revised it all. It's like, there's too much of the old in this. I want to hang on to the meat on those bones, but we need to take out some of the crap and maybe update it a little bit, but still hang on to all of the goodies that are in that. And so it's interesting that you would say it's about the Constitution.
Very much so. And it's Capricorn. It's in Capricorn, your sign again. So it's that redesigning.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot happening at the frequency that you've been talking about with the astrology. It all somehow validates.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You've been saying. So, Penny, we could talk for hours, but there are many questions coming in, I believe. Okay. Would you mind if we take some questions?
Sure. I would love that. Let's see here.
Thank you, Daphne. Appreciate your help here.
What would we do without Daphne? Oh my God.
Absolutely. And Radhika here helping in the moderation.
Oh, okay. Very good. Let's see. Question. What can the people who are awake do? You know what? I think the best thing is keep watching, number one, and begin to take steps. There is time for
Yes.
you to learn skills and to connect up with other people who have different skills and to create these little networks. I'm working on this community of consciousness online that I've been working with for 40 years now. I actually not been online for all that time, but I had this really potent kind of moment years ago with a guy who had been a monk in Tibet for many years. And he was also a student of Sri Aurobindo in India and belongs to that Sri Aurobindo community and goes to India for 4 months out of every year. And he said, I was talking about, I had created a community here on the farm. And after a couple of years, it was like, oh my God, this is not working. And so then another community formed a year or two later, and that lasted a couple of years. And it's like, oh my God, this is not working. And what I realized is that in the in the West, people need their own space. They need their own kitchen and their own bathroom and their own bedroom, at least. And that is not what you get in a community when you put together, quote unquote, an official commune or community type thing. And so that was a big lesson. But beyond that, what I discovered was that people needed to bring their skills and they needed to bring their willingness to work. And they had to be at a crisis point before they would be willing to do that. And if you could set up something that was a little network of people who were local, but were not limited to local. And this is where the Sri Aurobindo connection comes in. This monk, former monk, said to me, Sri Aurobindo said, we don't need to all be in the same place at the same time. We don't need to be local. We need to be a community of consciousness wherever we are on the planet. And so I just added the online word and said, why can't we be a community of consciousness online and stay in communication with one another and share ideas and information and techniques and what happens in your region at this time of the year and what do you need and who's got what and that kind of thing. So that's, I think, the setting up of that connection with other communities. And you may join a few and go, after a few weeks or a few months. But there'll be people that you will fit to a T,
Yeah.
and that will fit you to a T, and that's what you want.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Thank you. Beautiful.
yeah. So Nana says, isn't it a good thing that all this fake system is falling apart so we can start anew? Yeah, Nana, it is. However, the thing that I see is that the stuff falling apart continues to fall apart for a long time. And so we can't wait for that to be done or it's going to be too late. You have to start long before it looks like it's necessary. And then when it is necessary, voila, it's all set up and running. It's working. And so start now. The gardens, the clothing, if you live in the north, you need mittens. Who knits? Who makes shoes? Who can fix equipment? Who has stores of, old aluminum plates or old, plastic or whatever. Yeah, all of that. So, yeah.
Apparently there's a new paint now that they put on houses that 90 you wouldn't need air conditioning. It brings down the temperature by 90%. It's
Yeah. Yeah,
amazing.
that's actually one of the things that's embedded in some of the ceramics of the future that I saw when I was in the future. Oh wow. Oh wow. The houses of the future are astounding in terms of how they operate their HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, as well as electric, as well as air conditioning quality. Not cooling, but the condition of the air can be programmed for the individual who lives there. So all of that, it's yeah. Let's see. How long is this old Earth going to last? Oh, wow, Ed. I'm not sure how long it'll last. What I see is that by 2030, there's a lot of people that are not here. A lot of people have gone somewhere, and the population keeps dropping. And I actually, I've spent the last couple of weeks just immersed right in over my head in a whole bunch of medical questions that resulted in this huge aha about what we've been going through for the last 2 years. And I think because I don't know how to get that information out there without getting myself in trouble. I'll figure out a way. Maybe Daphne and I can just do something for BitChute. But I think we lose quite a few people who have poo-pooed the intentions of the governments. And those intentions, when somebody is threatening to kill you, you should really pay attention. And they have been threatening to reduce the population. That is an announced thing that is even on their Georgia Guidestones that they put up down in Georgia. I'm like, oh, you damn fools. We know that's fake. You're just trying to program people. And there's some other things about those Guidestones, though, that are really that stuff that's embedded in the material that's really pretty powerful. So, it's going to last as long as it lasts. But I'm going to say, I would think, based on what I saw with the robes and based on what I see now, plus I know a few more things now, if it lasts another 20 years, I would be stunned. If it lasts another 10 years, I would be stunned. If it lasts another 5 years, I think it's going to be a rough 5 years. And then it's done. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Marielle says, what can people like me who live in a major city do every day to stay in higher vibration, share that energy, and help promote healing without forcing it on others? That's really an excellent question, Marielle. I think one of the major things you can do in terms of a higher vibration is to really stay away from negative stuff. And that's, excuse me, like some of the music with really low vibration, some of the movies that have a really bad message of control and, mental programming, the creation of what I call urban myths, in which they promote an idea that is just not true. The whole thing about ETs is a perfect example of an urban myth that has been promulgated and is not accurate at all. So that's one thing. I think another thing is enough really good food, no junk food, enough supplements. If you're getting a superior nutrition, you're not going to end up down in the pits.
Yeah.
Your vibration stays high. Another thing is exercise. Believe it or not, exercise helps tremendously. So the first rule is take care of yourself first. That's number one. And then what happens over time is that you begin to learn how to test your friends and the people you meet as to where they're at. What can you say and what are they interested in? And sometimes that's all you have to do is say, well, what are you planning for the future? What do you think about what's happening? And then listen. And you'll begin to hear people who have like ideas and stay in touch. Look online for groups that are not too crazy, that have one foot in the spiritual world and one foot firmly on the planet, in the real world. Think about water. That's a major thing. And how to get water. And, think about, could I do what I'm doing, your job, whatever your work is, somewhere else that is not in a big city? That's a big move. So, and that's a very personal decision. So, but those are some of the things. And, within a year, you would probably discover that you've made a lot of changes and you are maybe even ready to take a step in some new direction. So, okay. Hope that's helpful. Um, so Aga says, I was born and raised in Poland under the communistic regime. I've seen the empty shelves, and the programming mindset poured from TV, newspapers, etc. And that's what's being pushed in the USA now. Oh, wake up. Yeah, I agree, Aga. I've been watching that for years, since George Bush Sr. was in the presidency. And it's been blatant since George Bush Jr. was in the presidency. And people they just eat it up. Hindsight is going to be a big lesson. Like, oh, wow. And maybe people, I don't know, I often think maybe it's because I'm older and I've seen 75 years worth of life. And the first half of that was not programmed like it is now. We were getting honest newspapers and news. And then it started to change. So, yeah, I'm so sorry to have to say, well, maybe I'm not sorry. Wake up, people. Wake up. So, oh my gosh, how do you say that name? Anadiqua? Anadiqua? What about Social Security income and disability benefits? Okay, I'll just try to keep this brief. I don't see Social Security surviving, but I do see that once the digital currency system is put in place, there will be some sort of new, I'll call it new Social Security. Guaranteed basic income is probably what they're going to call it. And that will be doled out to people in place of Social Security and disability benefits.
Yeah.
For those who have disabilities, I do see an attempt to get rid of those people through some sort of sneaky medical program that come on, we got this new medicine for you, and boom, oh, you're dead. So I don't trust the government. I wouldn't trust it as far as I could throw it. And so I think that there's going to be a switch out, and they're going to continue on with that. But the real freedom is going to be getting enough income that that's kind of additional income. You're not dependent on it. So, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that, especially over the internet and locally. Okay. Okay. So Michelle says, what about pensions from the government? Hey, Michelle, did you have to ask that? I don't want to answer that. Let me say that I see almost the same thing happening with the pensions as I see with Social Security. All of that system is going to go away. All of the pensions, all of the retirement funds, all of that. They just, oh, sorry, but we have this digital currency over here. And so there's going to be a choice that people are going to have to make. And what I see is a period where people step in and say, okay, I have to have some money to do some transacting. But once you do that, you need to start taking that money and using it to get outside that system. And that's going to mean producing something or being able to be of service in some way, or being able to get land, gold, silver, some jewels or jewelry, artwork, maybe liquor, food that you can use as money. So, yeah, it's don't get excited if they collapse it. Just watch. It's going to be really, I think, quite interesting. So Anna says, what if we aren't in debt? What should we invest in? Well, that's what I was just saying. The best investment is land. Even if you can only get, a half an acre or a half a hectare, if you're in the European system, enough where you can grow some food and say, this is mine. The other things still remain: gold, silver, any of the metals. If you have an oil well in your backyard, that you can maybe insist on rewriting the contract for whoever that's with. There's all kinds of stuff there. Produce something is going to be the ticket to a whole slew of new businesses that people say, I have this, I made some of these, I have some extra of that. Does anybody need this or want this? And they will discover the need that's out there, and it's going to be pretty much everywhere. So, yeah, okay. Think in terms of a small business of your own. They've destroyed them all. Restart on your own terms. Okay. So Aga says, so Aga's back. Aga, that's the name of my favorite stove, the Aga stove. This whole quote unquote shortage is so artificially created. Can't you see it? I'm not saying it won't exist, but I'm just saying this world is abundant. I know we are the creators. Yeah, that is so true. But here's the thing: when people have been raised on with this, what do they call that? The mama papa. The government is going to take care of me. The corporation cares about me. That is baloney. That is ground up. Never mind. So, yes, we have to begin taking responsibility for ourselves. Mother Nature, this is something that I've said a long time, for years, and I heard Daphne say it a couple weeks ago. There's all this uproar, and you're watching all this stuff on YouTube or on the news or on this or that, and then you go outside and you stand out there and there's nothing happening. It's peaceful, it's quiet, the sun is shining. What's going on here? And that is the thing that I would remind people. Out there in that outdoor world is Mother Nature. And that is our original caretaker, security blanket, mama, papa system. And we have moved away from that to rely on corporations and governments. And I think in order to get past this period of time, we have to go back and reconnect to Mother Nature. It is an abundant world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's dead right. I think this probably needs to be our last question, Daphne. So if you wouldn't mind, Daphne, can you prepare Penny's books and things so we can put that on towards the end, please? We'll answer this question, this next one, Penny, please.
Okay, so VM says, what is this on extraterrestrials that is not true? What do you mean specifically, Penny? Oh, what did I say about extraterrestrials? I don't know what I said, VM. Extraterrestrials do exist. Maybe I was talking about the programming about extraterrestrials that are mean and that are vicious and et cetera, et cetera. That is not the whole truth. There have been extraterrestrials here that have been trying to take over the planet, and they had a whole system in place. But at this point in time, the big guys up top who were the masterminds of that takeover have left. And so what we are left with are a few hybrids and a lot of corrupted CEOs and elites and people who have been integrated into certain bloodlines that do not belong on this planet, or that they belong, but they have been really seriously corrupted. They have another way of seeing the world and believing what's good and right and beautiful and true. And it's not my definition at all. But there are a whole bunch of ET people that are hanging around, and they're like playing cheerleader, rah, rah, sis boom ba, go, people, go, wake up. And they're hoping that we will stand up and see what's happening and say, nope, not having that. We're not having that corruption. We're not having that kind of government. We're not doing those kinds of things. That is not an evolved civilization. And so that's, I think that's probably the difference that I meant about ETs. So I hope that's it. Okay.
Gosh, thank you very, very much, Penny. I think there's a lot more questions, so I do hope that you will come back maybe in the next month or two for another session. Wonderful. And I highly recommend all of Penny's books. Daphne is sharing them here on the screen with you. You can go to Penny's website, which is consciousnessonfire.com. And it's full of some great information there. Fantastic videos, great books. I mean, if you can get on a tea and consciousness, well, good luck, but it's worth it if you can get in. There's a tremendous demand for all of Penny's services, but I'm just super grateful to you here today, Penny. Thank you. And it's been
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. And Daphne, thank you. And Radhika, thank you. Thank you, team.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.